philosophy at Morehead State University in Minnesota. He makes his living teaching young persons sensitivity, loving, and empathy. Dr. Magel teaches a very popular course simply called Animal Rights. Here is Dr. Charles Magel.
One week ago, last Friday, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, attending a human rights conference at Emory University. At lunch, I bumped into a graduate student from New York who was studying the natural vocalization behavior of chimpanzees. Never having seen a chimp, I very shrewdly bought Steve's lunch, and after an hour of interesting talk about chimpanzees, I asked him, what's the possibility of seeing the chimps here at the Yerkes Primate Center? His answer was this: nobody can see any chimps these days at the Yerkes Primate Center. Everything's locked up. All the personnel, including the director, are scared to death. Actually, if I remember correctly, his language was a bit more graphic than that, but I think you get the point. They are afraid the Mobilization for Animals are going to break in and rescue the chimps. I thought I would test out the Yerkes Primate Center a bit, so I walked over and asked if I could visit their primate library. That caused quite a stir. Why would a philosopher be interested in primates, they asked. Our library is not at all complete. I said, I'm interested in the philosophy of language, and you have made some studies of chimps' use of language. I waited for 10 minutes while the Yerkes personnel were frantically running all over the place, trying to decide whether it would be safe for a 63-year-old philosophy professor from Morehead State University to visit their library. I didn't get in. She said, we're so sorry. You will have to make a written request 1 week in advance in order to visit our library. Not only are they running scared at the Yerkes Primate Center in Atlanta, I can assure you that Professor Sumi and Dr. Goy and Dr. Will and company at the Wisconsin Regional Primate Research Center are running equally scared. And they have very good reason to be scared. Not because their primates are going to be rescued by the Mobilization for Animals, but more basically, they are running scared because they find themselves in an undefendable position. Several weeks ago, I took a look at Professor Sumi's PhD dissertation describing his social deprivation experiments on monkeys. In his thesis, Professor Sumi made this statement: fortunately, there are no ethical problems in performing such experiments on monkeys. If Professor Sumi has not already changed his mind, he soon will. For this demonstration, which we are participating in today, is just the beginning of the moral education of Professor Sumi and his colleagues in regard to experimentation on primates. No wonder they are defensive. they are caught in an escapable contradiction. All one has to do is to ask them two questions. Question number one: why do you perform these experiments on the primates? And their answer is, because they are like us. Question number two: why is it morally okay to perform these experiments on these primates? And their answer is, because they are not like us. So what they are finally saying is, the primates we experiment on are like us, but the primates we experiment on are not like us. Now, even my slowest students taking logic at Moorhead State University see a problem here. They cannot have it both ways. They are caught in the dilemma of a logical contradiction, and there's no way out. They had better face up to reality and rescue themselves by stopping such experimentation. Consider one of their typical attempts to defend themselves. Quote, "This is what the public wants us to do." But that defense won't work. Hitler used the same kind of reasoning. He said, "This is what the Germans want us to do." And secondly, if this demonstration at the University of Wisconsin, as well as at the three other massive demonstrations at Atlanta and Boston and Davis, proves anything, it proves that these experiments on primates are not what the public wants them to do, and we are the tax-paying public. The federal guidelines for experimentation on humans and the federal guidelines for experimenting on primates rest on the same logical contradiction which I mentioned earlier. When it comes to experimenting on humans, there must be a careful determination whether the human's welfare will be in any way be put at risk. When it comes to primates, anything goes. Any conceivable kind of harm.
Just the tape rolling, Mike. Yes.
The world's greatest sense of balance.
Guitar. We're going to be starting in about 30 minutes.
Good.
But we have some wonderful entertainment to get you in the mood for this. There are people looking for their groups out there. I would like the people from Illinois to hold up their hands and yell a little bit so their people can find them. People from Wisconsin.
I'm tangling this.
People from Michigan.
Wait a minute.
People from Minnesota. People from Missouri.
Got to get out into the open air. Take my body out into the wilds where nature's way, nature's way, nature's way, nature's way,
Can you tell me your name, sir?
Dr. John McCardle.
And where are you from?
Right now, Bloomington, Illinois.
And what brings you to Madison today?
Basically, I'm here to show my support as a scientist for the objectives and the goals of the Mobilization for Animals.
Is your scientific work involved with animals?
I used to do experimental surgery on animals. I don't anymore. I've switched to non-invasive types of research simply because I couldn't justify that kind of work. The size of the crowd is far more, I think, than anybody expected.
Yeah.
It's very successful. I was actually talking with one of the people on my bus, was talking to one of the policemen on a corner, and he was saying that he couldn't believe it. He said they had figured absolute maximum 500 people.
Is that right?
Yeah. And he said, you know, we just couldn't believe that this many people were showing up.
Well, there must be several thousand at least.
I would guess somewhere around 3 to 4 is my estimate. What I simply did was I took how many blocks we were strung out, how wide we were, and just made a guesstimate on how many rows deep. And I think about 3 to 4,000.
Dr. McCardle, I'm particularly interested in your perspective as opposed to other scientists who feel that animal experimentation is necessary. Is there a game there? Certainly all animal experimentation is not necessary, but what's your response to your colleagues when they face you with the imperatives of animal research?
I guess the basic thing I try to get them to do is to think about, okay, they're saying that animal research is necessary. Nobody really denies that some is. The real question we're dealing with, how much of it has any validity? You know, what is, in quote, necessary? You get the sort of attitude that academic freedom says I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want. Now, if a chemist is saying that, I'm not going to worry about it because I'm not worried about whether molecules suffer or not, but I think we have to have a whole different set of criteria for people who work with animals.
Across that lake over there. I want those people on the grass way over there to hear me. I want the monkeys to hear me in the lab. People have made this town famous by gathering like this. But I have some great news for you. This is the single largest, most visible activity to ever take place for the love of animals. These laboratory animals die at the rate of 3 per second. The government spends $1,333 every second to keep the torture going. Since you started marching, 21,600 laboratory animals have died. $957,000 was spent of your money.
I died of traumatic shock, dehydration,
Number 1592, I was sacrificed for aortic surgery.
Number U63, I was sacrificed for unknown reasons.
I represent number AH77, cause of death is undetermined. Number 80021, cause of death, meningitis.
Number X62, I was sacrificed for no reason.
Number 1819, sacrificed.
We just got a telegram from Diane Fossey in Ithaca, New York. For those of you who don't know, Diane Fossey is the woman who lived for several years with mountain gorillas in East Africa. Most or all of what we know about this vanishing species is due to her dedication and bravery. This is her telegram. I deeply regret that I cannot be with you. Those of you who so actively support the Animal Protection League. In my absence, I would greatly appreciate it if you could convey for me the message that native African poachers do less harm to free-living gorillas than what the experimentalist inflicts upon captive apes and monkeys within our society. Desecration is the first step towards extinction.
They are cosmetic, commercial, or industrial. To get funding, researchers need never prove that the results of their experiments will benefit mankind. All that is required is an educated curiosity. In fact, in order to routinely study the process of healing, if the testing on fatal efficacy may be cited in the future experiments.
Number 78035, sacrifice housing pen contaminated by PCBs. Number 0756, cause of death undetermined.
Number 1491, death, cardiorespiratory failure.
80,090, traumatic shock.
These animals you've heard about have died in this town at the center and at the lab. They were autopsied at the university here in 1979 and 1980. You are here bearing witness that the systematic torture of any living being, no matter how exalted the stated intention, ultimately demeans us and results not in any perceptible scientific advancement, but rather in a cheapening of our human purpose. There are those who will ridicule you in what you do. That is always the choice of those who live in fear when confronted by people of principle. But you must persevere, and eventually you will be triumphant because you are right. Finally, through your example and that of others on other fronts, the pain will be stopped. The fear will be vanquished, and all of us will find a way to live together in peace, love, and harmony. Thank you for what you are doing. Peace, Mike Farrell.
Thank you, Ken. My name is Wally. Greg Miller, Ken Oberg, and myself live with many other primates at a sanctuary for homeless and abused wild animals near San Antonio. Okay. This sanctuary is called Primarily Primates Incorporated, and it's funded by individuals like yourselves who are interested in providing care and respect for individual animals. There's a place for every person who wants to help in the animal rights movement. While many of the speakers at this and other rallies across the nation and in other countries will address the philosophical, practical, and financial aspects of human interaction with other animals, Greg, Ken, and I find our niche in direct support of our animal friends. Some of these animal friends have come from laboratories to live for the rest of their lives at Primarily Primates. Unfortunately, these are the very lucky few that escaped the humans who would use them as tools for their own personal gain. In this respect, there's very little difference between the scientist and those who purchase non-domestic animals for their own self-gratification. In both cases, the animal is the loser. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, non-human animals are not given the respect that they deserve. Our society has evolved to view the non-human as inferior to the human, even though he eats, sleeps, breathes, and feels in a manner very similar to humans. I submit that this view derives from power rather than compassion, and is seen in the inhumanity to other humans reported daily in our newspapers and other media. There's a line which one can draw which separates those species which demand respect from those that do not. A person who mistreats other animals is not only homocentric in his unshakable belief in human superiority, that person is also egocentric to the point of using other animals for his own personal advantage without regard for their welfare. There's an interesting and usually sad story behind every animal living at Primarily Primates. And I could speak for hours in the telling of these stories, but time won't permit that. I would like to tell you of one phenomenon, however, which demonstrates the value of our work, perhaps best of all. Spider monkeys, according to the scientific literature, live to be 8 or 9 years of age. At the sanctuary, we've carefully reconstructed a troop of spider monkeys in a large natural habitat. All of these monkeys are over 12 years of age. The oldest is 21, and none show signs of advanced age. By that I mean their coats are bright and full, their activity level is very high, their interest in their surroundings is keen. In March of '82, an infant baboon was confiscated by the U.S. Customs Service in a New Orleans barroom. This tiny smuggled baby that should by rights still have been clinging securely to her mother's belly was packed in a shipping crate, sent to a primate research center, and tattooed across her tiny little chest with the big black identification numbers C305. Thanks to letters of protest from people like yourselves, this little baboon was saved and sent to live out a more natural life at Primarily Primates.
AF-36, cerebral hemorrhage.
Number M33, dehydration.
Number Y34, cause of death undetermined.
AF-74, PCV intoxication. Number 2359, phenobarbital overdose, aspiration, pneumonia.
We have a star here today, Miss Amanda Blake.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You make me feel very, very good. That was always concerned with animal rights. My mother is still, at 81 years of age, madly running around Newport Beach, California, trying to save every stray cat that she can. So as a result of the environment I was brought up in, I have always been involved in animal rights. And I must say that I have cried many, many bitter tears over all the atrocities. But occasionally there is a miracle. And that's what keeps us all going. We've got to believe in miracles.
Can you tell me your name, sir?
My name's Wally Sweat.
And what brings you here to Madison?
I was asked to speak at the MFA rally on behalf of those primates that can be saved from laboratory abuse and need someplace to go.
You operate such a facility?
Yes, a sanctuary near San Antonio that's called Primarily Primates Incorporated, and it's the type of facility that was set up to take care of this need. It's one part of the problem to rescue these animals from laboratory situations or simply an inhumane situation with private ownership. But then the problem is, where do they go? Zoos won't accept these animals once they have been isolated, reared in difficult situations. They're not behaviorally and often not physically normal. So they need special care, and we work toward getting them back to as near normal as possible.
Can you tell me who you are and what brings you here to Madison?
Yes, my name is Dee Dunheim. I work with the National Anti-Vivisection Society in Chicago. I do public relations for them, and I've been involved with the MOB for a good year and a half now, waiting for this day.
I suppose a lot of work has gone into this?
Between all the different task forces and campus outreach and fundraising and media and publicity, I've never seen so many people work so hard for so long to have this pulled off today.
Well, I'm sure you must be very pleased with the crowd. You think this will have some impact on...
It has to have impact. It has to have impact. As I said in my speech before, once the media gets a hold of a story like this and starts to do a little bit more investigating, a little bit more questioning as to what is going on, it's got to stop. It's got to end.
Maybe if you could you tell me how you got involved with animals?
My particular interest about 4 years ago started with the Dre's eye irritancy campaign when I found out that animals were being used to test frivolous cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, industrial products. When I found out about the lethal dose and the Dre's and the patch tests, I got very involved with a group called Beauty Without Cruelty. And from there, found out about more vivisection and more cruelty. I got involved with many, many different groups and started writing for some of them and meeting the most beautiful people in the entire world through that first initial education.
Where do we go from here?
I don't know where we go from here. I think what's going to happen today is we're going to have our membership grow to an incredible amount. I think mobilization is going to be an all-consuming job for many, many of us. And what subjects we're going to choose is going to have to be carefully decided. Where we're going to have future demonstrations and what follow-up is, again, going to have to very carefully be decided. And I'm sure that the answers will come within the next few months.
Can you tell me your name?
Evelyn Hughes.
And what brings you here to Madison today?
The rally.
Can you tell me how you first got involved in animal rights?
Well, I was in vet school in Europe, and I dropped out of vet school after I had my degree because of the primate research. And I came over here to the United States and I founded Protect Animal Life in 1972. And I started out with the protection of the baby seals, and then the dolphins, the whales. We worked on the timber wolf, the wild horses. And I was a registered lobbyist for 7 years and worked in a legislature with various legislators on humane treatment to animals. And I was working primarily on the Animal Welfare Act in Wisconsin, which passed both houses. I was very proud of that. And because of my work, maybe I shouldn't brag, but I received a citation from the United States Senate, which I'm really proud, and that encourages me to do.
Where do you think the organization is going now after today?
Our Protect Animal Life? We're still involved in humane legislation. We have a bird sanctuary, and we will start a low-cost neutering and spaying program.
Here in Madison?
Yes.
Well, Sue, I see you're Central Regional Coordinator of the Mobilization for Animals. How are your feelings with regard to the demonstration today? Are you happy with the turnout you've had?
I'm ecstatic. It's fantastic. We have people here from West Virginia, from Ohio, from Missouri, all over the place, and they've come up by car and by bus and by airplane and by helicopter, and there's thousands here, and they're all united in the same cause for spreading humanity, and it's great.
Do you think this type of demonstration will have an impact on the condition of animals?
Oh, definitely, because what we're doing today, not only here, but in the rest of the sites where activities are happening here in the U.S. and around the world, is we're saying to the people in charge of these institutions, you have to change.
Where do we go from here?
We go on. We keep on. We take what we have accomplished, and we create better conditions, better laws, and better attitudes.
My name is Pam Johnson. I'm Central Region Coordinator for Mobilization for Animals.
And I'll bet you're happy with the turnout you've had.
I sure am. It's a beautiful day, and a lot of people are here from all parts of the Midwest, and the animals are truly going to benefit from today's first step.
What is the next step after today?
The next step is to continue pressure on the institutions, to let them know that the public is angry, that we are here today to express our grief and outrage at the decades of cruelty to animals in government-funded institutions. And we will not stop until animals do not suffer any longer needlessly in the name of so-called progress.
Maybe you can tell me what brought you into the animal rights movement.
I've had a concern for other species other than my own since I was a child, and my awareness has grown to such an extent that almost anything produced in today's society that you try to think of is either part of an animal's body or is produced or tested on animals. And when you come to that realization, you just have to do something about it. That's where I'm coming from.
No, he said that we're no worse than others or even better than others. I think he was trying to indicate that we have a unique policy statement, that it goes farther than any other policy statement in the country. And I don't think that's the point that you made to this audience. And I really object to that kind of statement being made. That was not the point of Dr. Goy's statement to you.
Senator Ronnie has from Wisconsin Public Radio. When you say there's much more room for improvement, what do you mean specifically?
Well, I think there's always room for improvement. And I think that while the university has made strides, and it may be not as bad as many areas in the country, that there is always room for improvement. And I think, for instance, that the University of Wisconsin sanctioning the breaking of the wings of some 74 ducks is unconscionable.
But when you say much more room for improvement, can you be specific in terms of what you would recommend to the university? Would you recommend that there be more stringent scientific review? Would you recommend that there be more people who are on the review committees?
The statement which the university entered into in 1982, which I referred to, is a step in the right direction. In that statement, the university indicates a willingness to participate with individuals representative of groups such as this, and I think that, yes.
But you suggested there was more room for improvement, and I wanted you to suggest some more specifics if you could.
Well, I think that in addition to the guidelines which the university has put forth, I think perhaps we could develop in the statutory criteria, which would apply to not only the primate center here, but to all people in Wisconsin. And I think that the guidelines which the university has started with could be used as a basis for building realistic legislation.
Do you think that other departments in the university ought to have similar committees to the one that the Primate Center now has in terms of animal research review?
Yes, I think they're making a step in the right direction.
I know, but would you call on the university to make sure that other departments that do animal research?
Other departments that do animal research, yes, I think it should apply to all departments.
Would it be voluntary instead of legislated, like you seem to be suggesting that is necessary?
All legislation is setting forth the guidelines or the mores of a particular society at a particular point in time, and sometimes these guidelines have to be set up in statutory form so everyone understands what the rules are.
That was the point of the policy statement that the Primate Center issued, I hope you understand. That it was an attempt to assure the public that what's going on at the Primate Center is not what is being discussed here today.
State Senator Fred Risser, I represent Madison in the Wisconsin legislature, and I'm also the president of the Wisconsin State Senate.
And what brings you down here to the mall today?
Well, I'm enthusiastically supportive of the goals of the coalition here today. The coalition is interested in drawing attention to the fact that cruelty to animals is not good public policy, and I think that they've done a very good job in doing so, and I would like to, as I did, make a few comments on behalf of the legislative way of developing guidelines to avoid this type of activity.
When did your interest in animals start, if you could tell me?
I suppose from a small kid. I've always had a pet, and I have a pet now, and I think that pets need protection just like human beings need protection.
What kind of legislative actions are you currently involved in with regard to this issue?
Well, actually, there's nothing in the legislative hopper at the present time, but I've been active in legislation trying to outlaw the use of steel traps and other what I consider inhumane activities as they apply to animals.
you've got some water back there or some kind of liquid we could maybe You wonder why you drive me crazy. You don't watch the road signs, baby. You never learn to stop at the light. I wonder why I get so uptight. The way you drive your automobile, if you don't get some sense somehow, those wheels will get you nowhere fast, and your next ride could be your last. Hey, you're a reckless driver, bound to be buried with your pride.
Number AH41, dehydration shock. Number 79101, rejection and dehydration.
Number X81, cause of death, dehydration.
I represent and love 78128, who was a helpless victim of PCB intoxication.
Number AG16, systemic infection.
Number AH66, dehydration and malnutrition.
This one is number 79043. It says dehydration, malnourishment, and shock. That's just awful.
For those of you that just came, those are animals that died at these laboratories in 1979 and 80. We're speaking for them.
1 week ago, last Friday, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, attending a human rights conference at Emory University. At lunch, I bumped into a graduate student from New York who was studying the natural vocalization behavior of chimpanzees. Never having seen a chimp, I very shrewdly bought Steve's lunch, and after an hour of interesting talk about chimpanzees, I asked him, what's the possibility of seeing the chimps here at the Yerkes Primate Center? His answer was this: nobody can see any chimps these days at the Yerkes Primate Center. Everything's locked up. All the personnel, including the director, are scared to death. Actually, if I remember correctly, his language was a bit more graphic than that, but I think you get the point. They are afraid the Mobilization for Animals are going to break in and rescue the chimps. I thought I would test out the Yerkes Primate Center a bit, so I walked over and asked if I could visit their primate library. That caused quite a stir. Why would a philosopher be interested in primates, they asked. Our library is not at all complete. I said, I'm interested in the philosophy of language, and you have made some studies of chimps' use of language. I waited for 10 minutes while the Yerkes personnel were frantically running all over the place, trying to decide whether it would be safe for a 63-year-old philosophy professor from Moorhead State University to visit their library. I didn't get in. She said, we're so sorry. You will have to make a written request 1 week in advance in order to visit our library. Not only are they running scared at the Yerkes Primate Center in Atlanta, I can assure you that Professor Sumi and Dr. Goy and Dr. Will and company at the Wisconsin Regional Primate Research Center are running equally scared. And they have very good reason to be scared. Not because their primates are going to be rescued by the Mobilization for Animals, but more basically, they are running scared because they find themselves in an undefendable position. Several weeks ago, I took a look at Professor Sumi's PhD dissertation describing his social deprivation experiments on monkeys. In his thesis, Professor Sumi made this statement: "Fortunately, there are no ethical problems in performing such experiments on monkeys." If Professor Sumi has not already changed his mind, he soon will. For this demonstration, which we are participating in today, is just the beginning of the moral education of Professor Sumi and his colleagues in regard to experimentation on primates. No wonder they are defensive. They are caught in an inescapable contradiction. All one has to do is to ask them two questions. Question number one: why do you perform these experiments on the primates? And their answer is, because they are like us. Question number two: why is it morally okay to perform these experiments on these primates? And their answer is, because they are not like us. So what they are finally saying is, the primates we experiment on are like us, but the primates we experiment on are not like us. Now, even my slowest students taking logic at Morehead State University see a problem here. They cannot have it both ways. They are caught in the dilemma of a logical contradiction, and there's no way out. They had better face up to reality and rescue themselves by stopping such experimentation. Consider one of their typical attempts to defend themselves. Quote, "This is what the public wants us to do." But that defense won't work. Hitler used the same kind of reasoning. He said, "This is what the Germans want us to do." And secondly, if this demonstration at the University of Wisconsin, as well as at the three other massive demonstrations at Atlanta and Boston and Davis, proves anything, it proves that these experiments on primates are not what the public wants them to do, and we are the tax-paying public. The federal guidelines for experimentation on humans and the federal guidelines for experimenting on primates rest on the same logical contradiction which I mentioned earlier. When it comes to experimenting on humans, there must be a careful determination whether the human's welfare will be in any way be put at risk. When it comes to primates, anything goes.
Thank you.